Hi, and thanks for listening to Total Access and Impact. Total Access and Impact is sponsored by Rental Kharma, where good renters deserve good credit. Check it out at rentalkharma.com, and that's spelled Kharma.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back again to another episode of Total Access and Impact. Today, 13th of March, we are going to talk today about the costs of moving to a new rental and why there's a great variation. You'd be like, well, why is that? Shouldn't it be about the same, within a few? Now it can be a lot, okay? And we need to talk about that. And the goal here is to make sure that you're credit ready for the moment when you need to move so that you can get the best deal for you and your family in the best neighborhood, et cetera, so that you aren't taken advantage of. Okay. So Wendy, what is give us an overview. What are we going to compare here?
So what we're going to be looking at today is the amount difference that you'll be paying between say a 580 credit score and a 620 or higher credit score. You may not realize, but you could be paying a whole lot of a difference between them.
Even just 40 points score difference can make that much of a difference, huh?
Yeah, hundreds or thousands. Yeah, it really, really can.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so when we think about rentals, here's the different rental situations. Let's go top level first, okay? You get the large apartment complexes that you see out there in most bigger towns. If the town's got 30, 40,000 people, there's probably a couple complexes with a couple hundred units, right? Those are the ones you see. Sometimes, or a lot of times, those are actually managed by larger national property management companies that have hundreds of thousands of units. And then you have some that are these mid-sized property management companies that are very much localized, and they might manage 10 apartments on this side of town, 20 over here, just varying kind of scenarios. They're generally not as high tech by any means as the folks that have the big corporations, right? And then the last one is, and so just so you realize this, less than 5% of the rentals in the United States are in the big companies, okay? Even though you see the buildings, you're like, man, they must be millions of, well, it is, but it's small percentage wise. And then the mid-sized property management companies, the localized ones, they're about 25% of rentals around the country, okay? And then everything else, independent landlords. 70% is like, Wendy is my landlord. I got some news for you folks. She don't answer her phone that often when she should. That boss is still dripping, Wendy. All kidding aside.
Your rent's late.
Exactly. We all can make fun of our landlord, right? A lot of times those landlords are family members, et cetera, whatever. But the reality is they have different criteria for renting, right? So your traditional landlords, they like to ask for first month's rent and security deposit, okay? And if they are pulling credit scores, each landlord makes up their own mind on what they're asking for. So it's just a one-on-one negotiation, right? They might, if you have a bad credit score, they could be saying, well, I want first and last month's rent and a security deposit. Now all of a sudden you're looking at, say, $1,500 times 3. There's $4,500 just to get in the door, right? That's a lot, okay? The average American has less than $1,000. What percentage of Americans is that?
70%, I do believe.
Yes. Class, if you miss this question on the final exam, I am going to take you for a walk, man. Okay? We all got to be knowing this, all right? So when you got less than $1,000, how are you going to find $4,500? You're going to be scraping. You're going to be selling mom's, grandma's ring at the pawn shop. You're going to be doing whatever you can, right? Okay. That's just, even Joe landlord says you got a 620. He might just say that, right? Or even whatever the number is, okay? Small and mid-sized property management companies, they're going to make decisions a lot of times based off of their inventory, okay? If they have a bunch of empty units, they're going to have looser rules. If they are pretty packed up, they're just going to say, just take the best people, and there's no rule that says they can't, all right? Then you also have the larger property management companies, because they have so many units, it's not uncommon for a 200 unit building to have 5 or 10 vacancies at a given time. And when they have that, or when there's, say, new construction going on in town and they're building new apartments just down the street, the motivation for the existing company is to give deals to get you in to sign a lease. Okay. This is very common. I personally experienced this myself just a month ago. Literally a $500 a month savings by signing 3 months before all college students came to town, and you get the $500 savings for 15 months. That's a pretty big chunk of change. You do the math on that, right? So, but would they give it to you if you have a 580 credit score? No. If you have a 640 or 50 credit score, there's a good chance. You got a 700, 720 and your credit ready all day long. So what they have is and you've even seen signs. You drive around, they call it move-in specials. Is usually the most common phrase I've seen. And there's also a website that maybe Wendy can share with us that I know is they actually have them listed on there for move-in specials. Is Apartment Finder, is that the one?
It's Apartment Finder.
Yeah,
Sure
apartmentfinder.com. Cool. The cool thing there is if you go in there, and if you don't mind living in an apartment community, you can, if they got amenities, some of them are pretty darn nice. A lot of them, when they have that empty extra space and they have that sign out there, if you walk in there with that, like I said, that 650 plus credit score, they will give you first month's rent free a lot of times and just a $200 security deposit. I saw one not long ago that had 6 weeks free. Yes, free up front. So you're literally talking about $200 move in, right? If you get your first month's free and it was $1,500, add that to the savings, back on what you would have paid to the other for the $4,500, you're talking almost $6,000. It's like $5,800 in realized savings, right?
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of money, and you can really
lot.
go and take advantage of that. And now some people might be like, well, I don't want to live in one of those places because you got somebody above you and it's noisy. Sometimes, but you can look around. I found places where there's apartment communities that are like townhouses style. There's all kinds of different ones to look at. So keep that open mind, and just, always poke them for, how many units they have, and is there any sort of deals going on? Because every day that unit sits empty, they're not making any income. Yeah, and if you got yourself set on, it being a house, don't be afraid to ask the landlord, hey, I'm down with this apartment complex. They got that nice swimming pool and all this stuff, and it's only $200 deposit. First month's free. Are you willing to negotiate? I'm happy to pay first month's rent. I think that's normal. But can I have a $500 security deposit and that's it? Show up with the credit report in hand. Save him some money and say, here's a copy of my credit report. It's got my rent payment history on there. Whatever you can to make yourself stand out. Write a cover letter, explain your situation, that your kid's going to this school, that you work, this, and how long you've been there, and tell a little bit about yourself, because the credit report is just a number, guys. Okay, and a lot of times people will really appreciate you and give you the nod just because you took the time to do that, which means you might just take time to take care of the place that you're renting from them. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to go at. So is there anything there that needs some clarification, Wendy, that you think is of deal? I mean, it's really straightforward, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward, and especially maybe if we the highlighting of month to month where it is grossly more expensive just because they have the ability to raise your rent every month.
Yeah, they will. That's still negotiable too, just because the computer spits it out and the person in the office will say, well, our pricing changes every day. Really? Could you imagine going to the restaurant and they say that to you?
Oh my gosh.
You go to the doctor, they say it to you. I mean, come on, really? Price changes every day. That's just brutal. Absolutely brutal. Yeah. Well, one additional thing to think about when you're moving is this, and it's timing. Okay. And a lot of places, depending on where you're at, there could be seasonality. There could be a college nearby that affects the rental market, etc. Think about those things when you're going to look for a rental, because that helps you in getting the best deal. A lot of people don't like moving in the winter. So when you do see a vacancy or a place for rent that time of year, and the timing is right for you, that might be the time you actually do decide you want to move, because you might be able to go in there and get better savings, right? If you think about the college towns, and I just experienced this with my son's going to a different school, it's a college town, okay? And it's like predominantly a college town, hardly any other stuff there besides that. And they do, in that town, they call it a lease up, is what they do. And it's like, in their entire town cycle for rentals revolves around the 1st of September. But you, in a town that's this big, when you have 40,000 people renting, you're inevitably going to have people that moved on, they transferred to another school, maybe they worked at the school, took another job somewhere, and you have this fallout. But because they don't have a bunch of students coming in to look for new places in, say, March or April or whatever, I stumbled on this place that had like 3 or 4 units sitting empty that they are like, these might sit empty for months. So they dropped the price literally $500 a month if you sign up today, and they then carry that lease on to the next following year. So like I said, it would have been like 15 months or something like that. But you can find those sort of hidden gems just by thinking it through. You know, if you're looking to move in April and May, or in the fall when college is going to be harder, so just see if you can get your situation to not be tied to that. And if you are able to be on a month to month without getting the rent jacked, that's very positive too, because that gives you the flexibility of the timing, right? And you're not stuck on whatever the lease terms are, and you're just having to, grin and bear it. Yeah. Okay. One of the things we run into, folks, over at Rental Kharma is a thing called subleasing. Okay. It's a term that is used to say that basically you're leasing from someone else who had a lease that was renting a house or an apartment. Okay. Maybe they need to move out and that you're doing that. It's a perfectly legitimate thing. Okay. However, it's legitimate when you have it in writing with the owner of the property or the landlord that owns the home. When you get kicked out of your girlfriend's place, okay, everybody knows somebody like this too, by the way. Don't kid me. Don't kid yourself. Your buddy got thrown out of his girlfriend's place, and he calls you or one of his other buddies and says, hey, can I crash in your extra room or on your sofa for a few days until I can find a place? And a few days turns into a few months, and he's still there. And he's struggling to move on because, well, he's got the 540 credit score, sleeping on the sofa, right? That's probably why he got kicked out from his girlfriend. And she saw his phone, and she didn't see text messages from his girlfriend. She saw his credit score and kicked him out. That's probably what happened. And if you don't think that's happened, you're crazy, because I know it has. Okay. But in that situation, that person on the sofa is not subleasing, and you can't sign up and use a rent reporting service to get that verified. The only way you can make that happen is if you're actually on a lease, so they go down to the office and they add you in as a sublease to take over the rest of the term of the original lease. Landlords and property managers are actually usually pretty fine with doing that. It's usually not a limitation, because they have someone else that's willing to pay. So you got 2 people to go after the money for instead of just one. So your chances of them skipping out go down, so it's not this bad thing, but you do have to go through the steps to do it. So if you are that person that's 540 on the couch, girlfriend, you know who I'm talking to. All right. Perk up. If you want to do subleasing, that's fine. You need to go down to the office and get yourself added on, or to get the landlord to acknowledge it. Then you call Rental Kharma. We'll help get that rent on there and get you off the sofa. Okay. And maybe you can get a nice place and get you a new girlfriend and get your credit score up there. So when she checks it, you know it's going to be okay. All right. Wendy's going to finish off the show today and just give you some simple tips to think about when you do go and move to a new place. Okay. Some you might want to check before moving or before signing, walking around the neighborhood, whatever. talking to people, and then some after right as you move in, because that's usually a chaotic couple of days, right?
Yeah, so I know whenever people go like to look at an apartment, you're more excited. It's kind of like, any big, money move, like buying a car or anything like that, you get excited. But
Yep.
at the same time, it's probably a really good idea. And this comes from personal knowledge. You want to check the property before you sign the lease, just to make sure there's not some outstanding things that need to be fixed before you moved in, because it'd probably be easier to, find a different property or get the work order put in early on. So here's a couple tips I've got about whenever looking at an apartment, because again, I've learned all of these the hard way. so you don't have to.
There you
But
go.
no, but number one thing, I'm always a stickler for flushing all the toilets, turning on all the faucets, making sure that the plumbing drains and the sinks drains, turn on the showers, make sure there's hot water. Also, you'll be able to see right away, well, that shower doesn't have any water
That's a
pressure.
good one right there, because
Yeah,
I'm a stickler for that one, and I've lived in places with really poor water pressure. It's
yeah.
it's depressing.
Yeah, nothing says like a crappy Monday morning than you can't get the shampoo out of your hair.
No,
So
yeah,
nothing
been
starts off a bad morning.
been there, done that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's wild. Also, checking smoke detectors, and making sure there's smoke detectors in all the living areas as well as the bedrooms, and the kitchen, obviously. And maybe want to do a little pokey pokey and make sure it is the actual working smoke detector and not one that the battery's been out of for God
yeah,
knows how long. Just because safety first.
exactly.
And then also, whenever you're walking around, open all of the cabinets and in the kitchen, the bathroom, everything. We're looking for two things here. We're looking for water, see if there's been current or past water leaks and things like that. And then also bugs like cockroaches. I've toured apartments that were full of cockroaches. I unfortunately lived in an apartment complex that got infested by cockroaches. So you want to be able to
Oh,
look before. Oh God, it was awful. I'm like, don't come in my house, because there was nothing we could do, because the apartment complex would like spray one unit and then spray one unit and spray one unit and not do the whole building. And so they
oh,
just
they just ran from
moved.
one to the other.
It, it was horrible. It was horrible. So
Oh,
let's just say the day my lease was up, I was well out of there.
yeah,
Um,
I would have gone down the. I'd have probably been down there trying to get out of that lease.
oh, it was, but at the same time, it was like my rent, like my portion of rent was like $185 a month. And so I could not complain very much. And of
You're
course,
not
this is
that
like,
old.
thank you.
185 a month. That's what I got to pay that in college 30 years ago. For crying out loud.
Yeah, no,
Not
this is about
today.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
But another thing I say is to bring in your phone charger with you and plug your phone into every outlet in that place.
Yeah.
Make sure that every outlet works, because sometimes they don't. And then also, like, just kind of make sure there's no musty smells, and that, like, turn on the thermostat, make sure the air conditioning and the heating works. And then also, like Cullen said, look outside, look around the neighborhood, and maybe check out your parking situation as well. And if you see an older neighbor that's outside, older people like to talk. Ask them what they think about the community, the building, the
Yeah.
landlords, and things like that. Just because they, one, you're giving them comfort by giving them someone to talk to, and at the, on the other hand, you're learning valuable information that you wouldn't get from the landlord, because they're not going to say, "Oh, I suck as a landlord." They're not going to say
No.
that. But
No.
the tenants around you, they'll be able to kind of give you their experience and let you know. And while you're going around, take pictures and make notes, just because whenever you go back to the office and say, like, yes, I would love apartment 3B, you can know that when you move in, everything is, up to snuff and, good enough for
Yeah.
you.
And check out the garbage area too, because a nice clean one is good. I will tell you, more than one time in my life, I have been raccoon startled. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as cute as they are, you don't even realize that they're like in there and they pop their head right up. Thinking, boy, and it's at night, because that's when raccoons are out. But yeah, make sure it's a nice, clean, tidy area so you don't have that one jump out at you.
Oh,
So
you
I'm
don't
going
want
to
a
add
pet
one.
trash panda?
You know, that's so funny. One other one, I'll tell you that this is effective in colder weather climates. Okay. I lived in Colorado for many years and I rented around Denver the last number of years. And when it snows in Colorado, usually most of it goes away through evaporation pretty quickly. But if you're on the shady side, or if you have a north facing driveway, a lot of times it can turn to a sheet of ice.
Mm-hmm.
And it can stay that way for weeks on end if the temperatures stay down. If it warms up, it usually goes away pretty quick. But I have seen in many situations, and I had one I made a mistake where our garage came out and it was a north facing garage, and it would be a sheet of ice, and you literally walking your way around the parking lot to another area because you fall and bust something. That can. It happened to my mom. Actually, she busted her elbow on a black sheet of ice getting up to her apartment or apartment complex. They had to go pay for all the medical and everything else, but they don't take good care of that kind of stuff. They don't pay attention to it with ice removals and stuff. So when you're looking, always look for a south-facing driveway. Okay, if you have someplace in the winter, in a winter climate, because that sun melting that off that driveway keeps that a much safer environment when you get home, and you don't have that surprise in your life. Because I can tell you, had that happened to me, I would have probably been out of work for a couple of months, because that's what happens, and nobody needs that.
Yeah, and not to sound crazy, but if you guys don't know how to check if you have a south-facing driveway or not, stand in the driveway, look up that bad boy, and then pull out Google Maps and see if you're pointing north.
Yeah.
Ta-da! Life hacks.
There you go. Yeah. If it's here's the tip, and also if you don't have the Google Map thing, you haven't figured that out. If it's 3:00 in the afternoon, look towards the sun. That's the south. In the winter, in the north, or in the summer, it's on the other side. Okay, that's all.
I rely on Google Maps because I get lost in a paper bag. So.
Cool. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. It has been a pleasure. We hope that you learned a little bit on saving a serious amount of money when you go choose your next rental. If you need to get credit ready in the process, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Kharma. We can easily help get your past rental history added onto your credit report. You get free coaching along with it, one-on-one, okay, to get you to your goal. You get a thing called an action plan. It's pretty sweet. And it's incredibly worth it because, as we all know, the stuff is confusing and it doesn't, we never learned it early on. If we had learned it back in 10th grade, we probably wouldn't remember it now, right? So this is a path to get you onto a better financial future for you and your wife. Wrap things up, Wendy.
All right. Well, thank you for the team at Rental Kharma for sponsoring this podcast through Total Access and Impact. And then you can listen to this podcast anywhere you get your podcast, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also check out the video on YouTube as well if you're just listening on a podcast. Definitely check out the video because you're going to get overlays and see the funny faces we make. The music is by Upbeat, and so it's free for creators. Check out upbeat.io. And so, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see y'all next time.